Thank you for joining us with Frankly Speaking the News. We've got a very special broadcast for you today. What we're doing is we're basically going to be covering some FDA hearings on the approval of the booster shot for Pfizer. These are open hearings that are available, and I thought it would be very important for us to take some segments out of this 8-hour hearing so that the audience, so that you guys can become educated about some of the points that they're discussing, about the efficacy of the vaccine, and some of the things that they're seeing in some of their trials. So this is a very important section that we're going to be talking about, a very important segment, and I invite you to look at it. We have purposely taken out and featured various testimonies that you will not hear in the media, yet these testimonies were on YouTube and they were live as part of the FDA hearing, and they were from doctors and analysts in the medical profession. So please bear with me as we're going to run through this. Each one of these sections is about, each one of these speakers have about 3 to 5 minutes. The early speakers will speak maybe 8 minutes, and they have charts and graphs, and I apologize ahead of time because I will probably be interrupting the video just to make a couple comments here and there. But this is for your education. This is not to promote one way or the other what you should do. You should always consult your doctor about whether you should get a vaccine for COVID or you should get the booster shots. But it's very important information that I think you should be aware of. So we're going to begin with bringing that information to you on the screen, and we'll begin with the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, Center for Biology, Evaluation, and Research. This is very important. It's September 17th meeting, and the first group that's going to present is an Israeli group that has significant data and data sets. They were one of the first to implement the first Pfizer shots, the first Pfizer vaccines, so they've got information to share with us. So we will begin, and I will light up the screen, and you should be seeing the screen right about now. I'm going to play the introduction. This will give you the credentials of the speakers and what they're going to discuss. So here we go.
Decisions that we came up with in our setting, and we hope that this will help other countries or enable them, other authorities, to reach their decisions with the most advanced, latest evidence that we have in Israel. Based on the multiple logos that you see on the screen, I would like to highlight that the work presented here was done by several leading academic institutions in Israel in collaboration. Knowing that the evaluation of the booster dose would be critical to Israel and the rest of the world, the analysis was done with extreme caution by different analysts from different institutions, by different analysis methods, as Ron will describe. And I would like to thank all these institutions coming together to do this work very diligently for several months. So we are both...
Okay, and what we're going to do here is we're going to get deeper into her presentation, and we're going to skip some of the statistical data and go to some of the relevant data, which is the adverse events by dose, and I will let you hear from the Israeli study group what they found in their study.
Point, except for effectiveness and what we think is important to see with the vaccine. The other really important point is the safety. So I'm going to show you a few slides of the rate of events that are reported to the Israeli Ministry of Health. I want to emphasize from the get-go that we are sure to have underreporting, probably the same at every dose, but even if we have more underreporting at the third dose, we still would think that serious adverse events would be reported to us. And I will touch on myocarditis in a moment, but this is generally the adverse events reporting to us from the first dose, the second dose, and now the third dose. And what we can clearly see is that for systemic adverse events, we didn't see any new types of adverse events, and the rate, to be modest, is at least the same, if not lower. And if we look at local adverse events, we would still see sort of the same trend. We don't see any new adverse events. We know that there's more lymphadenopathy, but we're not seeing any new adverse events, and the rate is smaller. Again, I say that with caution, that it's probably underreporting. When our HMOs are doing direct calling people or sending them questionnaires, they get more than that. But I want to emphasize on the serious adverse events, because this is what is really important to us. And we had 19 serious reports following the third dose for more than 2.8 million booster doses administered. And each one of them is being investigated by an independent clinical work group using all the data from the hospitals, from the HMOs, to try to figure out if this is connected to the third dose or not. So what we have been getting is 7 reports on serious adverse events following the third dose of the ages 12 to 64. You see how many vaccinees it was, over 2 million. And we had 2 allergic reactions that are noted as connected to the third dose. We had a case of myocarditis in a male in his 30s who was hospitalized for 2 days and discharged. And we had a case of Guillain-Barré and Bell's palsy that is possibly connected to the dose. And then 3 cases of DVT, PE, TIA, CVA, and VT in a runner that happened during a routine stress test. All 3 of them was not deemed connected to the vaccine by the work group. And among 65 and above, you see over 800,000 vaccinees. We had 12 cases of serious adverse events. The first was suspected encephalitis, a guy who came in with fever and confusion. And for him, it was the second time it happened. It happened to him after the first dose. Did not happen after the second dose, but did happen again after the third. And that's a possible connection. A vitreous hemorrhage that is possibly connected. A CVA that is still under investigation. A bulk of cases, 4 or 5 cases that are infection origin, septic shock, thrombocytopenia due to sepsis, 3 cases of UTI and pneumonia that was deemed unconnected to the vaccine, and then 3 cases of mortality that was not connected. People with very multiple comorbidities that had reason for their demise that was not connected to the vaccine. And so the myocarditis focus, I wanna emphasize first on this sentence. Most young vaccinees received the booster only in the last 2 weeks, so we don't have a full follow-up for them for 30 days as we want. We continue to follow them. Another important point is in Israel, because of the myocarditis, that was a signal. We saw it in the second dose of the vaccine. We saw increase in cases among young, mainly male, between the ages of 16 to 30. So you see here increasing cases after the second dose, and that was usually after the 4th or 5th day or during the 4th or 5th day after the second dose. So to some extent, we believe that some cases should have popped up in the 2 weeks follow-up that we have so far for several of the vaccines. But still, we need to be very cautious. We had only 1 case, as I said, of the 30-something-year-old male. In the myocarditis cases, we're actually doing active surveillance. So it's not just reporting to us. We are contacting each hospital every week to get all myocarditis cases, not just following vaccination. And so we feel here much more safe that it's not just under-reporting effect.
Okay, now myocarditis is chest pains, heart palpitations, heart issues. It's very serious. So for young people that they're having some issues with myocarditis, and it's very good that they're pointing out these issues and they're working on them. So we're going to continue. This is just one of the presenters at the hearing, and we'll continue on. This is another presenter, Dr. Jessica Rose. This is in the open hearing section.
And computational biologist. I've taken it upon myself to become a VAERS analyst, to organize the data into comprehensive figures, to convey information to the...
Now, VAERS is where adverse reactions are supposed to be documented by medical staff. There's been some controversies in the past, some Project Veritas videos where the medical professionals are being basically threatened not to report some of these adverse conditions, and that's on videotape with hidden cameras at a variety of hospitals, in particularly some federal locations with the FDA. So take that in mind when you hear this. These are the counts of people that were injured by the vaccine, hurt, killed, whatever it may be. And she's going to go through her presentation now. But VAERS is the reporting system where the medical staff is supposed to take any kind of adverse reactions to the vaccine and put it into that database, or any patient who calls in and complains, it should be located in that database.
Public in both published work and video mediums. Safety and efficacy are the cornerstones of the development and administration of biological products meant for human use. Risk is a measure of the probability of an adverse event occurring and the severity of the resultant harm to health of individuals in a defined population. Safety is a judgment of the acceptability of this risk in a specified situation. Efficacy is the probability of benefit to individuals in a defined population from a medical technology. Refer to slide 1. This is a bar plot that shows the past 10 years of VAERS data plotted against the total number of adverse event reports for all vaccines for the years 2011 through 2020, and for COVID-associated products only for 2021. The left bar plot represents all adverse event reports, and the right bar plot represents all deaths.
So, all vaccines combined from the year 2011 to 2020, there are the numbers below in the bar graph. So you begin at 2011 with 25,000, and you go to 2020 with 49,000, and then you have a spike in 2021 with 521,000. And then on the chart to the right of that, she's going to go through that, is the adverse number, absolute number of VAERS deaths on the right-hand side, all vaccines combined. Take into account that these are all the different types of vaccinations that people are subjected to. On the right-hand side are the actual deaths. So you have 7,662 deaths. Well, when this was taken, it was at 7,000. Now it's up to 16,000, and that was for 2021. All the other vaccines, you can see the numbers are substantially lower. So when people say to you that you should take the shot because the risks are low, take a look and consult your doctor, find out what they recommend for you based on your medical health condition, and seek out medical advice from your doctor. This, and by no means am I presenting to you any kind of medical advice. What I'm presenting to you is statistical data from the FDA hearing itself, from doctors and people in the medical field at a hearing on September 17th for the purpose of discussion and voting on whether to go ahead and approve a booster for Pfizer. Here we go.
Adverse event reports. There's an over 1,000% increase in the total number of adverse events for 2021, and we are not done with 2021. This is highly anomalous on both fronts. These increased reporting rates are not due to increased rates in injections and not due to simulated reporting. This has been shown using a comparative analysis of influenza data. The onus is on the public health officials, the FDA, the CDC, and policymakers to answer to these anomalies and acknowledge the clear risk signals emerging from VAERS data and to confront the issue of COVID injectable product use risk that, in my opinion.
One other important point to note is that this is VAERS data. The data comes from the CDC itself. This is government data. This is not data that you can discount or just out of hand. So this is what's being presented to this FDA panel that's listening to her testimony.
Outweigh any potential benefit associated with these products, especially for children. Slide 2. This is a time series plot that shows the total cumulative number of cardiovascular, immunological, and neurological adverse events for 2021 associated with COVID products. When the cumulative absolute counts are normalized to the total number of fully injected individuals in the U.S., we can see that 1 in 660 individuals are succumbing to and reporting immunological adverse events associated with the COVID product. The underreporting factor is not considered here. Slide 3. This is a phylogenetic tree showing the emergence of the alpha and delta variants of COVID-19 over time. The emergence of both of these variants and their subsequent clustering arose in very close temporal proximity to the rollout of the COVID products in Israel. Israeli data from the Ministry of Health and our World data reveals that 98.1%
המענה הקולי של 0, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 5, 0, 8, 3.
Oh my God. Sorry about that. Israel is one of the most injected countries, and it appears from this data that this represents a clear failure of these products to provide protective immunity against emergent variants and to prevent transmission, regardless of how many additional shots administered. And this begs the question as to whether these injection rollouts are driving the emergence of the new variants. There's clear and present danger of the emergence of variants of concern if we continue with these alleged booster shots. Thank you.
You'll notice too that on the left-hand side above the FDA logo is a time's up. So they have 3 to 5 minutes, depending. I think now they're at 3 minutes to make their presentations. Next up is Recep Levy, MIT Sloan School of Management, in this open hearing.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Recep Levy. I hope you can see my personal title slide labeled as slide A on the bottom right. I'm on the faculty of the MIT Sloan School of Management. I have no conflict of interest to disclose today, and my presentation represents only my individual opinions and does not reflect in any way on the positions of MIT. Next to slide B. Since the Pfizer's request for the approval of the boosters is partially based on the so-called study conducted in Israel, it is important to understand that the booster vaccination campaign in Israel was anything but a carefully designed study. In a matter of less than 6 weeks, Israel moved from its initial intention to vaccinate the over 60 population to vaccinating anyone above the age of 12, and it is now about to mandate booster vaccination for anyone to maintain green passport status. This does not allow any reliable learning, definitely not in such a short amount of time. And please understand that the adverse event surveillance system in Israel is truly dysfunctional, particularly around the booster deployment. I know from personal experience that the Ministry of Health in Israel does not address appropriately major concerning safety signals. Next to slide C. This leaves us with the question, what drove this massive booster deployment? Next to slide D. Trying to reach vaccine-induced herd immunity by reducing transmission rates will be consistent with the stated goal of the agreement that Israel signed with Pfizer, as you can see on slide D on the left-hand side. The problem is that by now we already know from mounting evidence that reaching herd immunity based on the current vaccines does not seem like a feasible or realistic goal. Not surprisingly, as you can see on the right-hand side of slide D, Israel continues to have among the highest infection rates per capita in the world. Next to slide E. You all listened to a presentation of the Israeli Ministry of Health that praises the efficacy of the boosters. I would like to caution this premature celebration and remind you that similar statements were made just 6 months ago around February on the 2 initial doses. Note on slide E on the right-hand side that COVID-19 deaths in Israel, in spite of all of the boosters, are on the rise, whereas in other countries, including many states in the U.S., they seem to be on downward trend at the moment. The data from Israel also highlights that the main risk of serious COVID-19 outcomes is focused to a large extent among the completely unvaccinated population and almost entirely in the over 61. On the left-hand side of slide E, you can also see data from Table 1 in a research paper by the Ministry of Health in Israel that suggests that the benefit from the boosters compared to the prior 2 doses in preventing serious illness might be much more limited than desired. There is much more to say about the problems of the current booster efficacy study. Next to slide F. But let me conclude by stressing how important it is to transition from emergency strategies to long-term ones. Slide F outlines 5 important considerations in doing so. They are self-explanatory. I hope you will hold off of approving this booster for broad use, at least until such a strategy is developed. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Levy. The next speaker is Dr. Joseph Raymond.
Hello, please, if you can go to my first slide. Hello, my name is Dr. Joseph Raymond, no conflicts to declare. I'm an emergency physician educated at Cornell Medical School,
Thank you,
residency with Charity Hospital in New Orleans, and I've been working in this region since. Where I work, over 65% of the population are not vaccinated. I'm here today to ask for help for those working the front line to help us reduce vaccine hesitancy. For this, we need larger trials that demonstrate the vaccine reduced hospitalization without finding evidence of serious harm. I know many think the vaccine hesitants are dumb or just misinformed. That's not at all what I've seen. In fact, typically, independent of education level, the vaccine hesitants I've met in the ER are more familiar with vaccine studies and more aware of their own COVID risk than the vaccinated. Next slide, please. For example, many of my nurses have refused the vaccine, despite having seen COVID-19 cause more death and devastation than most people have. I asked them why refuse the vaccine. They tell me while they've seen the firsthand dangers of COVID in the elderly, the obese, diabetics, they think their risk is low. They're not wrong. Next slide, please. One nurse showed me this Oxford risk calculator.
Okay, this is important. This doctor is a genuine individual who cares about his patients and really believes in the vaccine. But I want you to see this particular section. This was given to him by one of his nurses who refuses to take the vaccine. And listen to his statement to the FDA in a hearing on whether to approve this booster shot. Here we go.
A 30-year-old female has about a 1 in 7,000 chance of catching COVID and being hospitalized over 90 days. She asked me, can I assure her that the studies found her risk of serious harm from the vaccine is lower than her risk of hospitalization? The truth is I can't. Our trials weren't big enough. They weren't big enough to identify the vaccines cause myocarditis, yet now we know they do. Next slide, please. A recent observational study suggests the risk of vaccine-induced myocarditis in young males is higher than their risk of hospitalization from COVID. Is this true? We don't know. It's based on observational data. To know it's not true, we need a large trial that proves the vaccines reduce hospitalization more than they cause myocarditis in this age group. Next slide, please. The former FDA commissioner said the original premise of the vaccine was to reduce death and hospitalizations. And that was the data that came out of the initial clinical trials. Except, as you all know very well, and unfortunately, so did my nurse, the initial clinical trials did not find a reduction in death or hospitalization, likely because they were inadequately powered. Yet the former commissioner is correct that the initial trials should have been powered to find a reduction in hospitalization. Next slide, please. We need your help on the front lines to stop vaccine hesitancy. Demand the booster trials are large enough to find a reduction in hospitalization. Without this data, we, the medical establishment, cannot confidently call out anti-COVID vaccine activists who publicly claim the vaccines harm more than they save, especially in the young and healthy. The fact that we do not have the clinical evidence to say these activists are wrong should terrify us all. Thank you. Next slide.
Very important statements made by that doctor. Okay, this is from Steve Kirsch, Executive Director of the COVID-19 Early Treatment Fund. Let's see his testimony.
I'm Steve Kirsch. I'm Executive Director of the COVID-19 Early Treatment Fund. I have no conflicts. Advance to slide number 4 with the elephant. I'm going to focus my remarks today on the elephant in the room that nobody likes to talk about, that the vaccines kill more people than they save. Today, we focus almost exclusively on COVID death saves and vaccine efficacy because we were led to believe that vaccines are perfectly safe. But this is simply not true. For example, there were 4 times as many heart attacks in the treatment group in the Pfizer 6-month trial report. That wasn't bad luck. Theirs shows heart attacks happen 71 times more often following these vaccines compared to any other vaccine. In all, 20 people died who got the drug, 14 died who got the placebo. Few people notice that. If the net all-cause mortality from the vaccines is negative, vaccines, boosters, and mandates are all nonsensical. This is the case today. Death rates. Let's slide number 7, advance to the number 7 in the lower part. This shows that the all-cause death light rate in 3 cases. Only the VAERS numbers are statistically significant, but the other numbers are troubling. Even if the vaccines had 100% protection, it still means we killed 2 people to save 1 life. 4 experts did analyses using completely different non-U.S. data sources, and all of them came up with approximately the same number of excess vaccine-related deaths, about 411 deaths per million doses. That translates into 150,000 people have died. Next slide would be slide number 11, the nursing home. Now, the real numbers confirm that we kill more than we save. And I would love everyone to look at the Israel Ministry of Health data on the 90-plus-year-olds, where we went from a 94.4% vaccinated group to 82.9% vaccinated in the last 4 months. In the most optimistic scenario, it means that 50% of the vaccinated people died and 0% of unvaccinated people died. Unless you can explain that to the American public, you cannot approve the boosters. Slide number 16, please. Myocarditis. The paper just posted yesterday on medRxiv entitled mRNA COVID-19 Vaccination and Development of CMR Confirmed Myopericarditis shows that the myopericarditis risk was 1 in 1,000. And that's an overall age range from 18 to 65, mean age of 33. It is not inconsistent with what the VAERS shows. Next slide would be slide number 18, gaming of the trial. It's pretty clear that the Pfizer trial results were gamed. It's statistically impossible for protocol violations to be 5 times higher in the treatment group. Why hasn't this been investigated? Slide number 19. Maddie DeGray was 12 when she enrolled in the Pfizer phase 3 trial for kids. Now she's paralyzed for life. It wasn't reported in the Pfizer results. I told Janet Woodcock there was no investigation. Please tell us why this fraud was not investigated. And finally, slide number 20, please. Early treatments are a much better alternative to boosters. The proof is that in Israel, cases are at an all-time high. In India, Uttar Pradesh is now COVID-19 free as of today. Almost nobody there is vaccinated. Thank you.